Hello, everyone. It's Robin here on the Good Place Bench as part of the Placemaking Week Festival in Rotterdam. We're day 3, and I was just counting, I think, 30 plus conversations so far with all kinds of inspiring people from around the world working on that same mission. And I'm joined here. Thanks for writing us and saying, hey, we would love to share our story. And I leave it up to the both of you to introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a bit where you're from, what brought you to Placemaking Week here. And looking forward to picking your brains.
Thanks. So I'm Giselle Sabag. I'm American. And I've been part of sort of the placemaking network or family for many, many years now, actually. I discovered the concept when I was studying here in Europe, doing my master's in urban planning development. And then when I went to work in New York, I was super lucky. I reached out to Project for Public Spaces, and I got to work with them, and I became so inspired. And I've been working with them ever since. That was I don't know, 2013, 14, something like that. Like 10 years, I guess.
10-year anniversary.
Yeah, something like that.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And then later I became neighbors with some of the founders of Project for Public Spaces and the global placemaking movement. I accidentally moved to one of the best neighborhoods in New York City, in Brooklyn. And so we got to live next door to each other in Cobble Hill. And so we really became like family, especially during COVID. But even before that, we would go to dinner together, and I learned so much from being in the neighborhood and sharing spaces and talking about how some of these spaces worked so well and why. And then for why I'm actually here this year is I run an NGO focused on urban health, and I've been promoting these ideas of healthy placemaking for a long time through my whole career. And we started a collaboration, a partnership a couple years back with Placemaking Europe because I moved to Europe, and it was the same family and network here, and I wanted to know what they were up to. So we joined their Cities and Placemaking Partnership, which has been an amazing journey. I forget our official name, like we're like thought partners or something like that. Knowledge partners, that's it. We're knowledge partners on health. So we try to bring health into the conversation with all the 15 different European cities that we're working in. We might have more actually at this point, but it was 15 in the beginning. And they're trying to understand and consider how to really make placemaking systemic in the work that they do in their cities. And I'm trying to bring the health consideration and conversation in. And we want to talk to you about a new project that we have, but I'm going to pass it. I'm going to pass it over here.
Take it away.
Hi, I'm Tayana Panova. I was born in Bulgaria, grew up in the United States in the Midwest, moved to Spain, lived there for 8 years, and then moved back to the U.S., so been bouncing around a little bit.
Right.
My background is actually in psychology, and my thesis work was about the interaction between psychology and technology, trying to figure out basically why so many people have a negative relationship with their devices, with their technology. They're so attached to them. Why are we so attached to our smartphones, our internet, social media? And my conclusion was that a lot of people have this dependence on technology because the real world isn't giving them what they need. And we have some fundamental needs as humans, like social connection and stimulation. And if we're not stimulated or socially connecting in the real world, we get that from our technology, and we develop a negative relationship to our technology. So that's a symptom. We're talking about it as though that's the problem, but it's a symptom of a deeper problem, and the deeper problem is faulty built environment. The built environment should be giving you opportunities to connect with people. The built environment should be interesting so that you're stimulated and engaged. And so obviously what we're seeing is a problem in our environments. And that's what led me into urbanism. And I met Ethan, Fred, and Kathy, and now I work with them together at the Social Life Project on thought leadership and creating content about the importance of public spaces, the importance of benches and how catalytic they are, very much so, and why we need so many of these components in our neighborhoods, in our communities, if we want to really connect with each other on a broader scale. So that's what I'm working on now, and I'm working with Giselle on a new project that I'm sure that she would love to say more about.
Well, I actually...
So much to process, people, but it's good.
Exactly. I want to also talk a little bit about, I think your perspective is so interesting because you got there sort of in a different way. Yeah. If I can, I want to share a little bit about why I'm focused on this and how we've come together to try to create better cities and places together, right? So I weirdly, I decided that I wanted to do like green architecture, sustainable architecture when I was trying to figure out what to do. And we always grew up with these amazing places. We had a place in Canada that was just like communing with nature. We would just go see the bears. There's no electricity. It was amazing. So I always had this like really deep respect and love for nature. But I was trying to find a job that was creative and that would help people, that would help nature, but that also was like a real profession, because I have a family of artists, and that's too scary. I mean, that's not going to work out very well. And I went to this really kind of kooky, like prototype city in the desert. It was called Arcosanti. It had this visionary architect who now has sadly passed away. But he was making a prototype city in the desert that he called an arcology project. And it was architecture and ecology combined. And they used all natural materials, and they used passive solar design, and they naturally filtered their water. I was so inspired. And I thought, like, well, that's something good, and that's something creative, and I can travel and do that. So I'm going to do green building. But then I started working in green building, and I was making these like really sustainable buildings. But nobody that I was trying to convince about the sustainability strategies that I was promoting was very interested in clean air or clean water. They didn't really care. And so I ended up like thinking about, if we have really, really green buildings, but the way that you get there is by driving, then you really don't have a very sustainable place to be. So you have to think about the spaces in between. You have to think about the parks and the green spaces and the public spaces. I got into urban planning. And then I somehow went to this conference called Prescription for Healthy Cities, and it talked about every time you're making sustainable communities, neighborhoods, and cities, you're also improving health. So I got really into the health piece. And so that's what I've been doing for basically my entire career. And placemaking I love because it's a way that the community can drive the process. Yeah. They can really identify their needs. Yeah. We can create more sustainable, healthier places, facilitated by us placemakers, practitioners, by cities, but really driven by the community. So I really believe in the process. Yeah. And I also had some experience working around with benches and working for different cities to help them create sustainable places that we love and healthy places that we love. But recently, I would say so all that continues. All of the non-communicable disease prevention, all of the, physical and social determinants of health that can improve health in urban environments, in our public spaces. This all continues. But recently, there's been an interesting, I would say, focus from the public health community. So the U.S. Surgeon General, and then later the World Health Organization, has put out these public advisories in the last year or so around the real physical and mental health dangers of social isolation and loneliness. Mm-hmm. And so we've been talking about this for a long time, actually, with Social Life Project, with Tayana, and with colleagues about how placemaking prevents social isolation and loneliness. But we felt strongly that sort of the physical public space aspects of prevention were being left out of the conversation. Right. So there was all these advisories and, social isolation, loneliness is so bad for you. It's the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It has physical impacts and mental health impacts, but it also, the physical impacts are real too. Like you're more likely to get a heart attack if you're isolated. Isn't that kind of wild? And we know that so much of this is preventable, right? Yeah. And we actually, since Social Life Project, and the founders, Fred and Kathy and Steve, they've been working on and understanding how to create great places for people to connect for like almost 5 decades. Yeah. So, we've seen it work, and we've like measured those impacts, but how come we weren't seeing that as a solution from the public health perspective? So we put a white paper together, and we sent it to these committees that were supposed to be focusing on solving the social isolation and loneliness problem in the U.S. and globally. They were receptive, but we haven't heard much back. And so we kind of started realizing that we need to have other ways and channels of getting this information out there, because there's such great learning. And there's great experience. Like, again, Social Life Project, they've been focused on creating social life, social connection, social capital, which we know from the evidence can really solve for a lot of the problems we're seeing today. Yeah. But no one was paying attention to that. So anyway, we finally got together, Social Life Project, and me. And you.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah. So we launched a new project recently called Vital Cities. And one of the goals of Vital Cities is to do more education, training, learning about how to create healthy places, but also specifically how you can prevent, social isolation, loneliness, some of the mental health challenges that we're seeing today through creating great places that people want to go to, that are attractive, that are comfortable, that are fun, where you're going to meet different people that you wouldn't normally meet in everyday life. I think fun is like so important. Like, there are places you want to go. There are places you might fall in love. There are places that you can have ice cream or a beer, watch your kids play, or take your dog. Like, places that are fun are places that you want to be, and people connect.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think that the fun component is something that we think of as childish or childlike, and we overlook its importance sometimes, but it is essential to attracting human activity. If people don't see the reason to be in a place, they don't see what they can do there, or why it would be interesting for them, they're not going to go. So we see all the time these parks that are not parks, they're just fields, they're just a square of grass in a neighborhood, and then people are wondering, why does nobody go to the park? Why would they go to the park? There's nothing to do there. So
There's no people.
Putting the fun component back in public places is essential to getting people to go to those places. And then when they go to those places, they reap the benefits of those places, which is connection, health, being in the environment, and everything else. So it's catalytic.
It's interesting because that the red thread through all the conversations I've had is people. It's all about people, and whatever the issue is or the problem is that needs to be solved, comes down to people. Like how do we approach or get in touch with community and make community happy? People. It's not. A bench is nice, but of course it's the vehicle to get somewhere. But you need people on a bench bring it alive, right? And what sparks it with my head as well, I have to think, like blue zones. The why people are so happy, quality of life, happy in their lives. It's mostly people. Yeah. It's that sense of belonging, and it's all these things. So amazing, Vital City, to make sure that people find their people or new people in these places, right? That are there, up for grabs.
Yeah, if I could, I tell the story all the time. I'm tired and sick of it. But did you know that there's things that people pay a lot of money for? Like young people today, let's say people in their 20s, they're out of college. They're for a while for COVID, they were like everyone was really isolated, right? Yeah. And that's created so many problems that we're still dealing with. But even maybe you graduated from college and you have your first job, but you're not finding like your people. Yeah. Did you know that there's something called fun coaches? That young people today are actually paying a lot of money to tell young people how to have fun again. And I just thought it was so ridiculous that we even need to have that. Because what is fun is being with other people. And that's actually what the research tells us. So then there was a whole article about this, and the fun coach was saying, like, the research tells us, and it's like, it's not rocket science here, okay? Yeah. The research tells us that you have more fun with more people. Well, of course. And there's things that are just so easy. They cost no money at all, but they have a huge impact on our ability to make connections and have fun, and it really improves our mental health and our physical health, by the way. Like, for example, in Cobble Hill at Social Life Project HQ, seriously, we have HQ, and we have the underground, the placemaking underground. It's very exciting. Somebody during COVID was feeling lonely and isolated, and they started, this is so basic, they just started something called the Winter Social. Everyone went outside and they got together and they met in the park every once in a while. So the Winter Social is still going. It is so popular. So popular, and people have like fallen in love. People have gotten married because of the Winter Social. I mean, so many amazing connections have happened just because somebody got together in a great public space in their neighborhood. But what if you don't have a great public space in your neighborhood? How are you going to meet people? And so we have to really invest in creating spaces to enjoy each other's company, to meet each other, to have fun. And I think that's what we're trying to do. And I will remind whoever is watching this, if anyone ever watches it, that it's based on evidence. Yeah. So actually, public health evidence says this, but when you're out here doing your research, it's different than actually translating that research into into action on the ground, in communities, and that's what I'm trying to do, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Can I add to that? I think it's also interesting to look, just to add, is to how can we prevent it, Because we're mostly always looking to, of course, things that are solutions to cure something or make something better, but
that's once you're already sick.
Sorry?
That's once you're already sick, though.
Right. I mean, but if people are facing mental health issues, then we're late to the party. But I think it's also interesting to think with Vital City before, like, how can we wire our kids in such a way that they know how to overcome these kind of things.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, right now is, as you said, I mean, kids are like stuck to they're addicted. It's purposeful addiction, obviously, but they're addicted to their smartphones. And I think, I'm getting a little scared because I feel like maybe if you're on your phone all day, you don't know how to make social connection. And actually, I think it's a really overlooked sort of capability to have. But like, I love connecting with people, and I think it's something that I learned. And it's something it's hard to teach. You have to just sort of do it, and you have to connect with different types of people. I think to be open to different types of people, but that's how you learn.
But here you have 14, 15-year-old that get phone conversation training by their teachers because they don't know how to have a phone conversation.
Right, because people text instead, right?
Like about making connection, and you need to apply for an internship or whatever, and you need to do a follow-up call. They have no idea how to do a follow-up call.
I got my internship by harassing, like by calling. My mother made me call.
Learn how to harass.
Learn how to harass, yes. Like, be persistent. No, seriously, like I'd applied and my mom said like, well, what about that cool internship? And I said like, oh, I don't know. They didn't like me. They didn't get back to me. And she's like, you need to call. Yeah. And then I talked to the supervisor and they said like, oh, that's right. I forgot. We were busy. Like, yes, come in. Yeah. Come in on Monday. I mean,
or what about making eye contact?
You have to talk to people. That's right. Eye contact is huge.
Absolutely. I always say that communication is a skill. It's not something you're born with inherently knowing how to do. You have to practice it like any other skill because there's so many levels to it. There's so many nuances to it. And when you're only communicating via text-based communication, like text messages, Instagram, LinkedIn, all of that, that's one-dimensional. Text is one-dimensional, and that's just the bare bones of your message.
Snap, DMs, all that stuff.
It's very simple.
We were just talking about
It's very simple. Yeah. The real-life communication involves body language. It involves eye contact. It involves the tone of your voice. It involves knowing how to enter and exit the conversation. All of these are little, like, not traditions, but there's a dance to it. And you can't just get up and know immediately the dance steps. You have to learn them and practice them. So this is something that you can learn, but you have to be practicing it regularly. Otherwise, you're not going to know how to do it, and you're going to feel anxious and uncomfortable. And we're seeing that a lot. We're seeing a lot of people be anxious. It's because they don't know. They haven't grown up with enough practice of these really important life skills. And then later in life, they have to learn them, but their brains are already wired, so they're not as plastic towards learning that, and it becomes more difficult. So you have to grow up with it. That's why you need to have great public places you can go to as a child and as a teenager and as an adult. We have to design for all levels.
It's a vicious circle, right? Yeah. So you need public spaces to train people, but that's at the same time they don't know how to behave in public space because of that deficit of skill. Because they don't know how to behave in a subway or I don't know, just on the streets and so on, right? So we need to use public space to get them back into swing on how to behave through a city.
Well, think about it. I mean, if you drive to school every day and then you drive back, you don't even run into people on the street. You don't see other people. You're in your little bubble, and that's it. And if you don't have a public space or a park that you go to, you don't even have to see other kids. And, we were talking the other day about how, like, many kids, I'll say in the United States, certainly, kids are, like, overscheduled. Also, so they have activities, programmed activities, but there's no just social time. I mean, you were even saying that may have happened to you at some point. And how did you feel? Like, how did that?
No, it's a problem because I think parents sense that there is a problem, that there's something lacking in their children's lives, and so they try to schedule it into their children's lives, sports and clubs and activities, but that's not the same as unstructured play. Unstructured play is when kids themselves can decide how they interact with each other, the rules of their own games, they can be creative, they can be innovative, they have freedom and independence. That's incredibly important for childhood. If you put them in a structured setting, that's a whole different ballgame. It's great, but it's not the same thing. You need to have unstructured play. Clubs and all of that stuff, it has expectations of behavior, it has supervision from adults, they tell you what to do, how to think. It creates a whole different kind of person than if you let that child do it themselves and come up with it spontaneously. And that's why we need to create environments that allow for that, and that's public places at the end of the day. It's like you said earlier, this isn't rocket science. Like, it's complex when you start talking about it. It's common sense.
But we've forgotten.
Exactly. It's intuitive and common sense.
When you look at people, what expectations are, like what a certain norm is, that thinking that, if I don't do it, I don't belong, or it's sense of FOMO, or however we want to call it. But if you look at that activity, as you say, it's completely out of balance. I mean, I got two very young kids. I'm not on that level yet, but I'm bracing myself. I'm like, it's even not the life that I want to live. All right. At the same time, now I'm in a phase that I'm hitting playgrounds. So I'm looking at playgrounds from a different angle.
Yeah.
You know, a meeting point, and I see parents on their phones while they're pushing the swings.
That's right.
And I teach myself not to be on my phone when I'm pushing the swing, you
Right.
know?
Well, you made me think of another a project that I had done a while ago, which was transforming a very vulnerable and underserved neighborhood outside of Bogota into a neighborhood that was designed specifically to meet the needs of early childhood development, age 0 to 3. And we had to rethink everything in every way. And one of the things that we did as part of this sort of package of new transformative, hopefully placemaking in public space, interventions was we created specific playgrounds for young children that had the needs of young children in mind. So they can't walk yet, so there's like grab bars, there's lower fall heights, things like this. But one of the other things that I think was maybe not would necessarily have been one of the first things you would have thought of is that previously there were no benches inside the playground, right? And one of the challenges in this neighborhood was that it was so dangerous. There was actually so much violence in the neighborhood that none of the parents wanted the kids to go outside to play at all. There was no place for them to play, and it wasn't safe outside. And so there was also a real isolation problem, not only for the kids, but also for the caregivers. They had nowhere to go to meet other parents, in addition to the kids not having a place to play or meet each other. So then we put this sounds very obvious, but we put a bunch of, benches inside the perimeter of the playground so they could safely watch their kids play. The kids were not going to run away into the street, but they could also meet other parents.
Yeah.
So that was a huge thing that no one would have thought of.
But I think it's also cultural, because I had a conversation with Ramon in Valencia a couple months ago, where going to a playground is a social act. It's where you meet each other.
Oh, yeah.
Where bars are open next to playgrounds,
Those
which
are the
is
best
crazy.
ones, where you have a beer garden, so you can socialize while you watch their kids. I think those are some of the most successful.
Parents bring their kids to the playground just to have
socialize.
to socialize.
That's what I think are some of the most successful places.
No, when you were talking, I wanted to highlight the fact that sometimes we forget when we build playgrounds, we're thinking only about the kids because it's a playground, right? But we forget that the parents are there, and the parents are human, and they don't want to climb on the monkey bars and go down the slide and play on the swings. They have other interests. And so if we're designing a place for children, we need to also be designing that place for their parents as well, which means putting a beer garden or a cafe or something so the parents can be comfortable.
Ice cream, water feature. We know what people like.
Spending time there,
Music,
and the kids will
activation,
play longer.
programming.
Exactly. You can't just
The channel
focus
spread.
on a small segment of the population if you're building a public place, because it's for the public, and the public has all kinds of ages and backgrounds, and you need to design for all of them.
That's right. And I will say that I know sometimes in placemaking we think like this is common sense, this is just a nice thing to have. Sometimes it's too squishy or fluffy, right? But I just want to remind that there is real public health evidence behind these strategies, and we know now, we're starting to know even more what the benefits can be and what the real dangers are of not doing these things. And, I just started a new project with someone who used to run the mental health department in New York City, which is one of the really leaders of, not only their health department is an amazing leader in health equity and all these pieces, but also mental health. And we're starting to talk about how cities can be engines of psychological resilience. And the way we're thinking about this is that it bothered me that anytime people talk about mental health, they talk about more support. More clinicians, taking away the stigma, which is of course a problem, to people seeing mental health providers. But I'm talking about how the entire community is a mental health system or ecosystem that we need to consider and we need to take care of. And that's how we prevent. But we can really build psychological resilience, which we also see huge benefits in, and which is in danger because of climate change and anxiety and all these other pieces. We have to really consider, the entire ecosystem of mental health support. And I know that sounds very sciencey and very public healthy, but in fact, I usually use the different vocabulary to say the same things to different audiences, right? Yeah. So for scientists, we know that there's a benefit to this, and for us placemakers, we know that there's a benefit because we love to create a vibrant social life.
Or we have a responsibility.
Right. So that's the other part. I try to get this idea out there that anytime we're making a physical or social change in our environment, we have an obligation, in fact. There's a responsibility, an opportunity, and I think an obligation to ensure that the decisions that we make are supporting not only, maybe there's sustainability benefits, there's all different benefits we could be looking for, but also health benefits.
Yeah. I mean, well-being is very broad when it comes, there's so many forms of well-being. Yes. Even in public space, we need to try to address all of them, in
Yeah.
some ways.
But I do want to make the point that it's beyond well-being. We're talking about real, measurable health impacts.
Yeah,
And of course, yes, holistic well-being.
yeah. Well, I think that's more also not just only again to solve a problem, but also for the future.
Yeah.
Where if that's
Exactly.
if it's well-being in any age, even if you're retired until you're 3 years old, it all needs to coexist.
That's right. But talking about solving a problem, I'll just say we know we're failing right now.
Yeah.
I mean, majorly.
Yeah.
And if you look at those numbers about social isolation and loneliness, you won't believe the number of people that are suffering because of these things. We have a solution. Let's make a fun, great place we want to be in. We have 50 years of research. We know exactly what people where they love to be and how they like to connect. Yeah. Let's use that. Yeah. And it's benches, it's shade, it's activation, it's music, it's fun. Yeah. Ice cream.
And it is sometimes it's not about new things. It's more that we somehow gotten out of balance in certain ways that we need to refine. I mean, a bench.
Yeah.
That's been. I was telling you in Forrest Gump, 1994, released, sitting on a bench.
Exactly.
That's 30 years ago.
That's a great point.
You know, it's nothing new. It's just we have to make it more important and take it less for granted, I think.
But we know, for example, there are certain configurations of benches that make it more likely for us to connect with each other. Sure. We know that if you can move your bench into the sun or into the shade at different times of day, if you have some agency, that people are more likely to want to sit there and to want to engage with each other. So we've learned some things. So it's not anything new, but it is looking at the lessons, I think, of how we know people connect. And Social Life Project really has so much of that.
And I think what we talked earlier, it's about relearning how to make human connection.
Absolutely, but also to value that.
Oh yeah, of course. And I think that's part of it. What it is to have human connection.
Right.
Like I got so much energy from talking to 30 plus people in 3 days.
Exactly. That sounds like the most fun thing ever.
Yeah.
Olympics of connection.
Yeah.
That's right.
But at the same, I mean, you guys have met also a lot of people across these 3 days, right?
Of course, we've seen so many familiar faces and so many new faces, and it's amazing. And people are doing amazing things all over the world. That's what I also love about, not that nobody paid me to say this, but that's also what I really love about the Placemaking Global Network, is that it's like a family. We're all committed to the same things all around the world. We're from different disciplines. We're with cities. We're just residents. We are in the private sector. We're from all across the spectrum, but we all have to work together to make great places. And it's also something that I think about and that I learned from Social Life Project and from the placemaking movement is if you can think about shared space, then you forget your 10 PhDs in one tiny area, over here, because you're actually just talking about how to connect with your neighbors.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great way to come together.
We even hosted a talk, online talk about getting to know your neighbor.
Yeah.
There's so many people who don't know their neighbor.
Exactly. Well, what would Social Life Project say? That you should have a porch on every building, porch on every building, so you can connect with, talk to, get to know your neighbors. There's some really interesting porches in Amsterdam that we've seen people spending time on, and they say that they use those as a place to connect, which is so great. And a bench on every corner. We have to have places to connect with each other because you might not know your neighbors.
What about a Good Place bench? What do you think?
Well, I had a job previously where the founders of Social Life Project taught the person who was leading this effort, and I was going to cities around the world to create great benches, and I had to go out and measure benches and understand the exact measurements and the angles and the materials and the heights. And so I actually think this is pretty comfortable, but it wouldn't pass all the tests. Here's what it's missing, in my opinion.
Go for it. This is also a brainstorm.
Yeah, okay, great. So first of all, it's the right material. It's wood. Wood is always the right material. Yeah. It's not too cold. It's nice and warm, and it's sort of inviting. But I think it needs armrests. Yep. And I would say that they would tell me that I think that the height is maybe too high here. But it doesn't really bother me. I think it's pretty comfortable. So I think just a few tweaks. What I would love is if it was movable.
Wheels.
Yeah. Or that it could be a little bit...
Hover.
I mean, it can even be like a smaller chair that you can move around too. Or maybe you could have a little of both. Because this could be stationary, but if you can adjust so you can have people come and talk to you here too, that would be ideal.
I agree. I think that another component of the design of benches that we often talk about is whether they encourage people to connect or whether they kind of isolate people. Because the standard bench, the one that we're all familiar with, that's just like a two-seater that's facing forward, that doesn't encourage people to connect. And it's because it's so short, it makes people feel uncomfortable sitting next to a stranger. So what this bench I think does really well is that it gives people it's more relaxed. So you can be sitting here and I can be sitting here, total strangers. We feel comfortable sharing the bench, and because it's curved, we're also slightly facing each other, so it also encourages us to connect. So I think that this design is very good both for making people feel relaxed sitting next to new people without being pressured to like be right next to them like the standard bench, but it also encourages them to connect, and I think that's so important.
That's a great point. Great curvature you have here.
Thanks. It's finally somebody giving me compliments about my curves. Love my curves.
Beautiful.
Thank you. To wrap it up, as you know, the Good Place Bench is also because we want to talk about what a good place is. I mean, we shared a lot of insights, of course, but I'd love to have your personal point of view on what a good place is.
I think a good place is one that people want to be in, that is active at day and night, during the week and on the weekend, that has amazing activities and programs for people of all ages. Has some nature. I mean, ideally, it has some nature that we can see, some shade, amazing benches that are movable. Oh, and a water feature, and food, ice cream, at least, and maybe some beer.
And you have that in Brooklyn?
Yes, we do. We do. I live in Barcelona now, though.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Barcelona also has plenty of that. They are technically, the public health researchers that I work with will tell you that they're lacking green space. It is true, but there's other beautiful nature, and there are great places to connect. Yeah.
Great. What about you?
I think that a guiding principle for creating great places is that they need to be designed in accordance with human nature. So if you're wondering, how do I make this place better? What's missing here? You have to think about what do people in general want and need. And we all want and need very similar things. We need shade. You can't be expecting people to sit in the sun. They will not do that usually. You need shade. People often get thirsty or hungry. You need refreshment. Yeah. People like to have something to look at, something beautiful to look at. That's why we say put a focal point, put a fountain, put a garden. Yeah, people like to look at that, especially when they're relaxing. They want to be recharged with beautiful things. So people need to rest. You can't expect them to just stand in the park. They need to sit down. So if you're wondering how to improve a public place, just think about what humans like and what humans want. And then you will know exactly, what do you want? Look internally. What would you like to have in this place right now or in 1 hour from now? So if you think in that way, you will create great places that attract people, because people go to places that they feel good in and that there's things for them to do and enjoy and ways to play and activities. And I think that once we realign the built environment, the external world, with our internal world, then we're going to have the harmony that's going to be great for well-being, for health, for community, for connection, for everything. It's just this harmony, this alignment that we're missing right now, and we're using technology to kind of plug the gaps, but we just need to be more in harmony with ourselves, really.
That's what I call closing statements.
Absolutely.
Tayaan and Giselle, thank you so much for your time and sharing your story. Good luck with the Vital City project.
Thank you.
And I'll be happy to stay in touch with all of you, whether it's Barcelona, New York, wherever you are. And I put the details below for everyone watching to check out. And looking forward to the next one.
Thank you, Robin.
Welcome. Bye-bye.